you.
That is actually one of the really main reasons I've come here, besides that I always enjoy coming to Australia. So I had specifically asked the organizers not to put me right after Dove, and so they honored my request. I appreciate that. It's hard to follow him. But one of the things you mentioned about doors, I learned very early in my career. I started going to Israel many years back, and I've now invested in about 180 companies throughout my career as a VC. And there is nobody who pushes those doors harder than Israeli entrepreneurs. I learned this the hard way. So when in the US, I've been in many different locations, and one of the locations I used to live in was Dallas. And the area code for Dallas is 972. So after my first 2 trips back from Israel, I get these calls at 10 p.m. at night. And I say, oh, it's from Dallas. Well, after the first 2, I figured it out. It's from Israel. It's not from Dallas, because the country code is 972. And so long story short, what I decided was there is no way I can push back against an Israeli entrepreneur who's trying to push the door open. So then I hired an Israeli to manage my Israeli investments. And that's actually worked out really well. That's been fine. So today here, I'm not only wearing my Microsoft hat, so I'm going to talk a little bit of Microsoft, but I'm also wearing what I would call an honorary Israeli hat. And why is that? So I've been investing in Israel, as I said, for almost 10 years now. The first 5 years, I used to go to Israel. And if anybody who has not been to Israel should experience that, the security getting into the country is really, really hard. And the first 5 years, for obvious reasons, because of how I look, it was really, really hard getting into the country. Hours of questioning. After the 5th year or so, the immigration officer actually asked me, what do I do? And I said, look, I invest in companies. And I said, well, what's an example? And then that was great timing. So I said, I invested in Waze. I got this great smile from her. She stamped my passport. She must have written something in my permanent record, because I've never had any trouble getting into the country again. Just completely fine. So I give that story, and I'll come back to it later on, because it also shows how Israeli companies have successfully transitioned from hardware to software. I'll come back to it. The other reason I like giving these talks is Israel is one of the few regions in the world that has recreated the magic of Silicon Valley very successfully. Now, the local hummus flavor, that is fine, but it still recreated that. And that is, I need to get my clicker. Sorry. That is incredible. I actually really hope that other regions are able to replicate the same success, because there should be no reason that the Bay Area should have a lock on tech innovation in the world. Really, there should be more and more pockets of innovation that are locally sourced, and you shouldn't have to move to the Bay Area to get the next round of funding or to grow your company. So that is sort of my hope, and we'll sort of cover a little bit of why Israel has done what it's done in the presentation. Let me start with a quiz which everybody can answer. So you look at this, and who thinks the answer is 90? Wow, it's a really, really intelligent audience. The IQ level is very high. So obviously the answer is 1400. And this is why we're all here. I didn't actually have the time to calculate what Eddie said in terms of the number of startups per day, but I think this roughly translates to what she mentioned in the opening. But it's incredible, the rate of innovation in Israel and the number of companies that is starting up. Throughout the presentation, throughout the day today, hopefully you'll see a lot of these kind of stats. So I won't spend a lot of time, but this is sort of the very famous, why is Israel a startup nation kind of chart. Clearly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but it is sort of the backdrop for a lot of discussions today. The one interesting thing going out of this is what happened in first half in Israel. It is incredible, the amount of funding that was raised. It's a historic high. And it has to be taken in context. Being from Silicon Valley, the first 6 months of the year were actually quite tough in the Valley for entrepreneurs. I would say it was one of the worst fundraising seasons sort of post the last 2008, 2009 timeframe. Companies were having a lot of trouble raising money. And in that same time, you see Israeli companies raised a historic high amount of money. This is quite incredible. Going through this quickly, I'll do 2 quick examples of of where Israel is sort of excelling today. I think one, which started with Mobileye being established, is in the area of automotive. And automotive is getting more important. Why is it getting more important? It's really, the car is becoming a physical browser for everybody. Let me take this example. So this is a well-known example of Tesla. Tesla released an autopilot feature, I think a year and a half back. Very quickly through social media, they figured out that there was a problem. The users are reporting a problem in the feature. They were able to upload all the information from the sensors to the cloud, figured out the root cause, patched the solution, and then downloaded over the air to all the cars. Think about all the things that could have gone wrong here. So they had to use cloud computing, they use IoT sensors, and they had to be securely downloaded to the cars. When I started my career, my first investment was in a company that was essentially downloading phones over the air. If the phone download did not work over the air, it's fine, you got a bricked phone. But this, you got a bricked car, that is incredible. So the kinds of technology that is involved, not only in autonomous driving, but secure downloads, connectivity, all of that is why I think Israel's lead in this area is very interesting and why many multinationals have set up shop there. The second area that I think everybody knows about is cybersecurity. Now, despite being an honorary Israeli, the one regret I have is I did not graduate from 8200. And so they will not give me that degree. Okay, they'll give me everything else, no 8200. But this is really, really critical. I mean, I think there's no doubt that there is a leading established competence in Israel because obviously of units like 8200. Just in the last 8 months when Microsoft Ventures started, we made 3 investments in Israel, and 2 of them are security related. Last year, before I came, so I can't take credit for it, Microsoft bought 4 companies in Israel, and 2 of them were also in the security domain. So clearly another area where Israel leads the world in terms of technology expertise. It is important to sort of be known for something. So I think as other regions figure out what they want to be known for, it shouldn't be another me too. If you can develop an expertise that is locally sourced, that is very, very hard to differentiate and get other regions to replicate, that will actually be a long-term competitive advantage for a region. Quickly on Microsoft presence in Israel, we have our development center, and this has been there for 25 years. The security component is clearly there, but there's many other areas of expertise. We also have 7 accelerators across the globe. The one in Israel has been very successful. It also actually does the back office for all of the 7 accelerators. It's always been recognized as one of the best ones. I'll switch quickly in the remaining time I have to more of a macro view and how we see from not only Microsoft perspective, from a venture perspective as to how things are moving. So in 2011, Mark Andreessen made this famous comment. And you can argue, a lot of VCs in the audience, I'm a VC, that VCs are mostly self-serving. So, okay, VCs say this because they want to promote their portfolio companies and whatnot. You can ignore this a little bit. But then last year, when the CEO of the world's largest conglomerate sort of says the same thing, you take notice. And why is this happening? Why is it that software is becoming so much more important? And the reason is, of all the good work that companies have done in the last few years and sort of the technical competence that has been there in Silicon Valley, in Israel, and other places, that has really reduced the cost of hardware and increased computational power manifold. So some of the examples there are incredible. Drones that used to cost $100,000, you can go buy them for $700. Smartphones, the equivalent of $500 you can get for $5 today. So there's just incredible amount of innovation. And what this has resulted is massive amounts of wealth creation by software companies. It's just incredible. This kind of growth has not happened in any other era. Now, I use Uber a lot. My daughter uses Snapchat. But at the core of those, it could not be possible without the always-on cloud computing, decrease in the cost of smartphones, ubiquitous mobile connectivity. All of those are underlying assumptions. And today, when I hear from startups, we heard about a robotics company. They don't actually focus on the hardware component at all because they just assume for granted that's going to happen. This kind of curve is going to keep going, and that you can just build on software. That is true. But as we keep going into new and new areas, you still have to see what is the next hardware innovation that's going to enable the next generation of software wealth creation. So there is, I think, room for both, but it's been an incredible journey over the last few years on what's happened. So this, I want to get to a quick point here on pivoting. Now, I tried to bring a local reference, and I couldn't find a good one. So I thought, I'll try with rugby. And for the Aussies in the room, if you missed the reference, you can come and hound me after the room. But there is a technical tactic in rugby called pivot. And really, that's on the sports side. You hear of pivot. It's not very popular, apparently. But there is something called pivot. And then we see startups pivot all the time. But the one thing that is incredibly rare to see is to see countries pivot. And I'll come to that. Now, the reason I put this picture instead of a map, because if I put a map, I'll start an argument right now. So I did not put a map here. I just put an image that sort of tells you about this is Israel. And while the chart today looks very good in terms of funding today, but there was a time 4 or 5 years back that the Israeli VC ecosystem really was hurting. VCs could not raise the next fund. Entrepreneurs were not getting funding. It had reached a historic low. And the reason was that for many, many years, Israel was known for telecom, for hardware, for expertise that was very critical in the last generation of technologies, the hardware changes I showed, but they were not as good on the current tech. But over a period of less than 5 years, they almost feel like the country has pivoted. And since I've been doing this for 10 years and going to Israel, I just think the country itself has pivoted. That is actually incredible to see a whole country. And it's not obvious, it's almost from an outside perspective. Folks who are in the country every day don't actually see this. But from an outsider perspective, it is incredible that you can have a whole country pivot. So it's a testament to how, if you have focus, and you have the right expertise and the support from the government, the chief scientists, and all of those in the ecosystem, you can actually make this transition happen. So 2 quick examples. I already talked about Waze. This is from my past life, not at Microsoft, but from a Qualcomm perspective. 2 very good exits we had. Waze, everybody knows. The other one folks might not know is Revelo, which was sort of helping with the transition to the cloud. Now, both these are examples of what I would call the post-hardware pivot that Israel made. And those are both very important components to essentially what we believe from a Microsoft perspective is going to be the next step. And so I'll just end with our CEO, Satya's sort of mission statement. His mission statement is to empower every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. And basically, that's a very expansive statement. How does he do it? His worldview and his strategy to execute that mission is sort of assumes a world where there's the mobility of experiences. And when I say mobility of experiences, it could be an auto, a drone, mobility of sort of mixed reality experiences, all of that the users are used to now. We just don't want to be fixed. And it's just not about the phone. It's about everything that we have that is mobile in our lives. And that is coupled with always-on intelligent cloud computing. And those two, we believe, are at the core of what Microsoft wants to do. So given that, and the examples I showed earlier, can tell you why we have such a big commitment to Israel in the country, both from an investment perspective, from a development center perspective, from the accelerator perspective. So really, I think we believe that Israel is uniquely positioned to help us as Microsoft achieve Satya's vision. With that, I thank you again for inviting me to the Israel Trade Commission, also to Australia for hosting me. Thanks, and I look forward to coming back again.